All right, and of course, we still have some questions from the session yesterday. Persons were still sending questions to us. So while we await the Prime Minister, we have a couple of questions for you. The first one reads: do we have an estimate as to the size of the magma chamber of La Soufriere?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the size of the reservoir is. I can get the well, if just based on some of the eruption volumes that we've seen historically, we can put a lower limit on the size of it, and I'm guessing that lower limit would probably be somewhere around like 50 million or 60 million cubic meters. And that would be probably like just a ballpark figure for what this volcano would have done in the past.
Okay, it doesn't matter the size of the chamber though, in everything, in overall activity.
Yeah, it does in the back end, because if you have a volcano who's willing to erupt a significant volume of its reservoir, then if you have a bigger reservoir, then you would have a fairly large eruption on your hands. So it does matter, but it depends on how your volcano is willing to behave.
All right, there's another part to that question from uh, that individual. It says, it appears that the explosive eruption so far has been Plinian. What is the likelihood of other types of eruptions taking place?
Yeah, that is not quite correct. I mean, for instance, the activity we had here last month, we had, well, some people would probably think that what happened between the Friday afternoon and Sunday could be considered Plinian or even subplinian. What was happening after that was that the explosion styles became a type which we refer to as Volcanian, a Volcanian type events. And I think those were probably the more common ones in 79 and not so much the Plinian or subplinian activity, because I hope people get the sense of the fact that after Sunday evening, very little ash, if any, actually fell on southern St. Vincent. So most of the ash which fell during the first few days, from Friday afternoon till Sunday evening, that was because of the style of activity, which was Plinian or subplinian at the time. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's mostly Plinian. It can definitely do Plinian or subplinian, but we've seen that it can produce volcanic eruptions as well. And it's basically a function of how much energy the system has. So if it's very energetic and it's basically pulverizing the rock, all of the rock to ash, and generating these really high ash plumes which blanket the island. When it's less energetic, it can't pulverize all of the rock to ash. It basically leaves back these large blocks. And then these are the larger blocks which eventually collapse and form these pyroclastic flows. And this is what happens when you get the Volcanian style activity. You more or less get column collapse flows in them, whereas the Plinian and subplinian is mostly too energetic, so you're not really collapsing the column until maybe towards the back end of the whole event.
All right. Over the last few weeks, you've been measuring the SO2 profile of La Soufriere. Is it that you would continue this while the volcano remains in an unrest state, or there's a cutoff period for this measurement?
It will be continued, not necessarily by me. We're definitely in the process of handing over that job to a number of volunteers from the island who have been trained or are in training to collect that data. So it will be continued, but not by me.
All right. Yesterday we discussed in terms of the degassing aspect of the volcano. In light of this, are there any other significant gas types present in the volcano that we need to be concerned about at this point? We've been hearing quite a lot about the SO2. Any of the others that we need to be concerned about at this point?
Well, I'm not sure. I will not use the word concerned to describe what you should be thinking about or how you should be thinking about these gases. or at least not for the general public.
Okay.
But we measure 4 gases in total. I measure hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and water. So I'm having a look at what those other ones are doing as well. And that, as I said yesterday, this gives me information about different parts of the system. So when I look at the carbon dioxide flux or the ratio of the carbon dioxide to the total sulfur, it tells me a lot about what's happening deep versus just looking at the sulfur flux only, which tells me what's happening in the mid-crustal region. So as I mentioned yesterday, when I am doing that flux measurement, the multigas is actually on the boat with me, running at the same time, and it's collecting concentration data for the 4 gases. So I could use the ratio of the other 3 gases to SO2 to generate flux data for them based on the SO2 flux, which I would have calculated.
Someone is asking, what is the level of CO2 currently at Soufriere?
Yeah, the CO2 flux says, I mean, they're fairly large compared to the SO2 fluxes, and you would expect that because carbon dioxide is a larger constituent of the volcanic plume, more so than any of the sulfur species. So, you know, the values we're getting are a few thousand of tons per day, sometimes a few tens of thousands of tons per day of CO2. And, you know, as I said, you expect that simply because there's a lot more CO2 in your system than sulfur.
All right. Another question here. Was the lava at Soufriere ever runny, or was it always this way?
Yes, it definitely was running. I would say a very long time ago. But the cone, the actual physical cone that you climb onto to get up to the top to look down into that volcano, it's built with interlaid lava flows and airfall deposits. So when you get to the summit and you look onto the sides or inside the crater and look down inside the crater, you can see the lava flows like really clear, and the lava flows exposed around the whole country as well, not just from Soufriere, but from the other centers. So at some point in time in this volcano's history, the lavas were a bit more liquidy, they were more running. For whatever reason, which I'm not quite sure, it shifted to a more evolved composition where the lavas became stiffer and started to build domes instead of generating lava flows.
All right. And if anyone has questions, you can send your questions by WhatsApp at 1784 457 2705. Send us your WhatsApp 1784 457 2705. Or if you're viewing the live stream, you can also post your questions there as well. We love to hear from you. We expect to hear from Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves momentarily joining us by phone this morning. But Dr. Christopher, in terms of your stint here, are you leaving us soon? Or are you handing over to a new team?
Yes, the plan is for me to leave on Friday, which is 2 days from now. Mr. Lloyd Lynch would be here on Monday to take over as team lead.
All right. And he's wishing you all the best with that as well. In terms of the ongoing monitoring, you mentioned earlier that you'll be having a team of locals who'll be trained to do measurements, etc. At any point, will you be handing over completely to a local team, or you'll always have someone from UE Seismic on the ground?
No, I think having a local team running the observatory is definitely the end game. What sort of timescale that happens on would depend on how much progress is made and how fast things happen. But that is definitely the end game, to have it being run by local staff.
All right, just hold a second. I'll try to connect the Prime Minister. Hold with us. Stay with us. This is Aina Soufriere, the morning edition here in NBC, and we hope that you are in tune this morning. And if you have your questions, remember you can send them to us at 457-2705 and share them with us there on the live stream as well. You can do so. Uh, Someone is asking, what was the scale of La Soufriere eruption based on the Volcanic Eruption Index?
Uh, this is a good question. I think we probably had a VI 4 or 5 event. But yeah, I need to verify that. But it was definitely somewhere around there. But I need to and let me verify that first. That is not really something I've been thinking about properly because, well, there's so much other things going on. But I haven't really given much attention to that sort of question. But I think it's a fairly, it definitely was a fairly significant eruption in terms of the volume it produced. So I need to check that out and get back to you.
All right, another one question. I believe you may have answered this one before, but for others would, I believe we can attempt that again. In terms of the explosive activities, would you say that we're out of the woods per se?
Um, well, in terms of that episode of explosive activity, we can definitely say that is behind this. I think right now there are a number of options as to what this volcano may or may not be doing. And I think one option, and the most welcomed one, would be that the eruption has stopped and it's dying away. Another option could be that it's a break between pulses. However, I think that is fairly unlikely based on how I've learned how this volcano behaves. So fingers crossed is the first option that, you know, everything is done. It's done doing what it's doing this time around, and it's going to go back to sleep and leave the people of the country alone.
All right. Someone is asking, what is the percentage chance of the volcano blowing again? And I'm guessing it means in an eruptive, explosive eruptive stage.
Yeah. For us, when we look at a question like that or try to answer a question like that, we tend to give ourselves a certain time scale over which we expect things to happen. So, I mean, the answer to that question would be at some point in time, Soufriere definitely will erupt again. On what sort of time scale? I mean, that's a very different story. If you look at the average time between eruptions over the past few centuries, you probably get an average time of around maybe like 50, 60 years in some cases. But there was a situation in 71, 79 when these eruptions were roughly 10 years apart. So it's very difficult to say when it's going to erupt again. But, you know, I'll be a very surprised man if this is the last eruption from this volcano ever.
All right, but it's good to have some sense of comfort in some of what you say here. In terms of the flow, there's another question regarding the flow under the seabed. I'm not sure if you're clear on that. And can you tell me where the lava in the volcano is flowing, if it's flowing under the seabed? I'm guessing the deep chamber of where the magma lies is what they're asking about.
Well, it's coming up from a subterranean reservoir. It's probably most likely lies somewhere beneath the sea floor, but it's not in contact with water. And I say it lies beneath the sea floor for a simple reason. The island is not a large island. So the fact is, if you got a reservoir at depth, which is fairly large and can contain that much magma, you would expect some sort of horizontal distribution in your reservoir, or even a vertical distribution. So it's most likely that it's offset and not definitely straight down under the volcano as you see in textbooks. So you see the offset to the north, south, east, or west of the island. and the magma has to do some sort of lateral migration as well as upward migration to get to Soufriere. So yeah, it's not really traveling under the seabed. It's coming from deep, and we're guessing that this magma is probably coming from around 15 kilometers deep, which is quite deep. So it's not coming into contact with the ocean, if that's what the person is asking. It's just coming up from a cavity in the ground where we're sitting down waiting to erupt.
Another question, will you be doing a flyover or final assessment before you hand over, before you leave?
Well, no, not me personally. I guess at some point in time there will be a flyover by whoever the team lead decides, or whenever he decides to do such a thing. I have no intentions of trying to sit down in there over the next few days. We did not organize a flight or anything like that, but hopefully when Mr. Lynch comes and he sees the need to have a look, that happens fairly quickly, because no one has really seen what's happening in there, but none of us has seen what's happening in there since the back end of the explosions. So we're still not quite sure if there was a dome in place or if it's still growing a dome. I mean, we just don't know the answer to that question.
All right. A few days ago, you shared an image on your social media page, on the AWI Seismic Research page, about a crystal that was found in the Lahar deposit in the Wallaby River. And I'm sure persons would have had questions as to, what is this comprised of, and of what value is this crystal that was found? What does it mean for us?
Well, basically what that image shows is a crystal in a rock, which by no means is an unusual thing, because what rocks are, in fact, is actually an aggregate of crystals. So for some reason, and I could tell you, basically that crystal had a long time to grow. That's why it got so large. So that crystal was sat there for a very long time and grew slowly. So it was fairly large. That crystal that you see in that picture, that crystal is what we call a plagioclase crystal. And almost every rock from St. Vincent, if you pick it up, and you would see these crystals, these white crystals in it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're exactly the same thing. So in terms of monetary value, it's slightly too common for it to be worth anything. I mean, it's a very beautiful crystal if you're into that kind of thing. But basically, I think what that photo shows is that you've got some crystals which are fairly large, which would have grown slowly over a very long time, and some crystals which are very small, very fine-grained crystals, which would have grown quickly over a very short period of time. And it basically gives you an idea of how dynamic the system is, where you've got very old crystals and very young crystals being erupted at the same time in the same eruption. And that gives you an idea of how complex our jobs get when we're trying to figure out, time, residence times and ages for these rocks, because there's quite a few different generations of crystals which can be in them, and not just one single generations. So there can be a number of messages in these rocks which you have to decipher and decide which one doesn't make any sense and which ones do.
All right, well, we'll continue on that discussion about the crystal, but the Prime Minister is now joining us. Good morning to you, Prime Minister.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to listeners at home and abroad. ITC, good morning.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
I only listened to heard the latter part of you because I was on this morning with a number of, I had to do some coordination on some regional matters. And I just had a pretty long conversation with the head of CDEMA, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. That's why I wasn't able to get to you this morning up on the radio station. I'm sorry about that. We left Parliament about midnight last night. We had a long day yesterday. TC.
Yes, sir.
you know. I heard the latter part. No, let me ask you this thing. I have to ask you this almost every time we come on. With the continued quietude of the volcano, what people always want to know is what are the signs that you're looking for in the quietude, this period of quietude, that you can say, well, look, in addition to going back to the orange zone with all the qualifications and limitations, how do you know when to say that in relation to the red zone, you should return?
Yeah, that's a good question, Prime Minister. I think currently Soufriere is not exploding, so it's not really actively terrorizing the population of the country. However, we need to understand that the red zone is still filled with a lot of ash deposits and is set up in a situation where you can get these mud flows or lahars,
Yes,
if you call them that, cutting into the roads. So in terms of occupation of the red zone right now, it's not a function of what the Volcan is currently doing. It's a function of how safe the government, which would be you, sir, can make the area for the people to reoccupy as long as we think that the eruption has stopped. So even if we were to be totally convinced right now that the eruption has stopped, the question is, how feasible is it for people to reoccupy
yes,
the red zone in the windward side? And I think some work needs to be done
yes,
before that happens, Prime Minister.
yes. No, I think the clarification which you gave there is a very important one from a policy standpoint, because obviously there are lots of practical things which we have to do. For instance, in relation to the water, well, we know about the ash. And that is, we just approved in the budget last night, the supplementary estimates, supplementary appropriation bill, about $28 million. We're doing a lot of private contracting and other things to help to try and clean up the ash, but we need a certain amount of equipment too. And the private sector has some equipment, but they themselves would need more equipment. Obviously, well, the report which we got from UNEP, United Nations Emergency Program, I actually have their final draft report in my hands. I got it yesterday, and I've been reading it, studying it. The lot of cleaning has to be done. So that's a big issue in the red zone, and even in the top parts of the orange zone. For instance, down in Chateaubelair, Chateaubelair and Fitzhughes. Richmond is in the red zone, and that also has obviously a lot of ash. But Fitzhughes and Chateaubelair in the orange zone, plenty ash still. Now, so that's the ash. But then you take the water on the leeward side, Chateaubelair and Fitzhughes, all the way to Richmond. The water situation is, I've been advised, is fine, because the intake at Hermitage, which feeds that is okay, and we didn't have break pipes to the extent that you have a challenge. Electricity is also back. However, on the northeastern side, you have the challenges with both water and electricity. The water for Georgetown and above the dry river going up to Orange Hill normally is fed from the Perseverance intake. The Perseverance intake is above Dixon, Valley Dixon, which is an inland village between Georgetown and Langley Park. They're now cleaning that. They had to do it manually because they can't get the equipment past given the condition of the road because of the eruption. And so they can't get equipment up there. So a lot of the cleaning has to be done manually, which means it's taking longer. So perseverance intake, maybe by the end of this week, that might be okay. But then that could only take you as far as Rabaca, because definitely the lines, the pipes taking the water got broken when with the floods now, which came. And so those pipes have to be replaced. And they don't know how far up going to Orange Hill they have to replace. So that's an additional problem, therefore, which has to be dealt with. In relation to Sandy Bay and Owea Fancy, the water systems in Fancy and the water system in Sandy Bay, the catchment areas, essentially they are high up on what is Soufriere Mountain, because Soufriere Mountain is as you know better than most people would know, including myself, Soufriere Mountain is not just where the crater is. It's an expansive mountain. So all those intakes would have to, the one in Sandy Bay and the one in Fancy will have to be essentially rebuilt. So that's water. Then electricity. Though Vinlec switched off the electricity, obviously, up there, north of Rabaca. And there are problems with lines and so forth, even when those are repaired. For individual homes to have electricity, every single individual home has to be inspected by Vinlec in conjunction with the Electrical Inspectorate of the Ministry of Works to see whether the houses have to be rewired, whether they're fit to receive rewiring. You see the point I'm making?
Yes, sir.
So that these are big issues which have to be dealt with. Now, in this reconstruction phase, but people can only go up there and work. The agencies can only go up there and work in very controlled circumstances because still of the threats of Lahars and so forth. So it's a complicated process, but I wanted you basically to give your view and to see what matters are specifically volcano related directly, and those which know how you could get back to habitation given the consequences of the series of eruptions. So that your explanation which you gave, the clarification, is a very important one, not just for policymakers, but also for the general public, particularly those in the red zone. On the issue of Lahars, I don't know. I'll have to get a copy of the UNEP report sent to Seismic. But they made a number of, they had 5 summary factual findings. And for instance, they said here on the findings, things which you all have been saying, that wood and other natural materials are incorporated into the debris flow, causing retention of ash and other materials, increasing the potential for flash floods many days after the last rains. And then they were expanded on that too. As people clear farmland in areas far from the road, this could contribute to woody debris gathered by lahars, if not rapidly collected. 3, lahars will continue to be a major problem in much of the north for several years. Even if the volcano stops erupting, roads are likely to be blocked at various times. 4, in some areas, it remains too dangerous to go uphill, upriver, to assess the volume of the material that might come down. It is unknown how long this will be the case. 5, construction of private homes has historically not been completely controlled, meaning that people live in areas that are now areas of risk. I suspect those areas near to the riverbed and so on and so forth, or even in some cases on the riverbed. And they gave 5 recommendations. 1, develop public communication to ensure awareness regarding Lahar as a long-term risk. This could be a program similar to the volcano already, but emphasizing Lahars. 2, connect all land clearance efforts with collection systems to avoid accumulation of debris that could contribute to Lahar flow and implement constant river training. 3, we do constant river training at Rabaca. We do in the other areas too, but we have the equipment by Rabaca. 3, develop integrated risk management to prepare communities for Lahars and other disasters and periods of isolation. 4, develop long-term monitoring of Lahar-related parameters, river network, bed elevation, mountain rainfall, seismic signals produced by Lahars, and early warning systems. And 5, strengthen public land use planning and zoning to ensure that there is no construction on dry riverbeds, riverbanks, and other areas exposed to Lahars. Those are their 5 findings, final findings in summary form, and their 5 recommendations. Those sound sensible to you?
Yes, Prime Minister. I would agree with what's been said. Basically, what you would have highlighted here is that right now, the main issue in the red zone is safety.
Yes.
But, as I said, if the eruption were to be declared over now, access would also be an issue to certain parts.
Absolutely.
Because even if you had no houses in the parts of these rivers, every now and again, the access to certain areas would be blocked. And you would need to clear that road. So
yes,
there are a number of issues: access, infrastructure, and safety, which need to be addressed.
I remember, and I believe listeners would remember this, because people listen very carefully to the Seismic Research Center, and they also listen very carefully to the observatory at Belmont. To all of you guys, all of you professionals doing such fantastic work. But I remember Roderick Stewart said that one of the continuing challenges from a seismic volcanology standpoint is that though you didn't have the emissions of ash taking place, and there are no explosive eruptions since the last one on April 22nd. The matter of venting of gases, he said, was an important indicator to show that there is still activity of which we must be profoundly aware, and that the La Soufriere show is not yet over. Do we still have in the venting of gases, and to what extent? That remains problematic, and the significance of that, if it is continuing to happen at a level which gives continued worry.
Yes, Prime Minister, we're still getting gases coming out of the volcano. I can't say, with any certain degree of confidence that it definitely suggests that the eruption will have a restart. What it does suggest to me is that it's probably not quite done yet, which means that it's probably resting, or it's probably petering out. It's probably dying away, but it's not quite dead yet. So we can't say with any confidence that it's stopped.
When last did we measure the venting of the gases? The gases being vented.
That would have been yesterday, Prime Minister.
And what was the daily output yesterday?
I think around 208 tons per day, sir.
Oh, which is way down from the 1,000 about a week ago.
Yes, Prime Minister. It does move around a bit, and I'm still trying to figure out why it's moving around that much, because those variations are quite large. A variation of around 800 tons per day is quite a significant variation. So
historically in relation to La Soufriere, to the extent that you have had measurements of vent, because I believe of gases, I think this is the first time we have measured. We didn't measure in '79. As I recall, Richie said, but historically in this series of eruptions, and comparatively between this volcano and others, the extent of the oscillation that you see, you mentioned about 800 tons oscillation there between last week and say today, and I believe that from what you had said, I saw you said something in an interview in a publication. Though I don't always take as gospel what I read in publications, because from my experience sometimes guys don't hear it with clarity, and they don't necessarily report it with clarity. But that it's gone down as sometimes below 100 per day.
No, that is not correct. I think these values I'm getting around 200 tons per day are the lowest, whereas 1,000 tons per day is the highest. So
okay, well that report which I saw was not right then, because they had said they had gone as low as 25. Never went to 25.
25 tons per day.
Yeah.
That is not correct, sir.
Okay. All right.
I do not recall getting such a measurement. As I said,
okay.
The lowest measurement
okay.
I would have collected was around 200 tons per day. There were a couple close to 1,000 tons per day. But as I said, it's moving around. So, there are times when it was high there, and then there are times when it seems to be low. I mean, if there is some sort of cyclicity in it, then it gives us an idea of how the degassing is unfolding and what's causing it. But basically what we could have is like a residue of what was erupted just sitting there and giving off gas, and that gas eventually will drop off and disappear to zero. So
but what you're saying, thus far there has been no predictable pattern of cyclical pattern.
Well, it's given some sense of cyclicity.
Yeah.
I think off my head, I would probably guess roughly a week and a half. You have to remember that if your data set is not the most robust, then it's difficult to see any patterns if your data is quite spaced out. And at present, we're probably doing about 3 measurements per week. So
okay.
Yeah, so it's probably not the clearest, but I think I can convince myself that there's definitely some sort of cyclicity in that data set we've collected so far.
Is the cyclicity trending downward?
It's sort of like a yo-yo, sir. It's doing that. There is no net overall change. When you look at the highest values versus the lowest values, they seem to be more or less ballparkly the same. So I guess you're asking if every time it pulses up, if the peak it goes to gets lower.
Yeah.
So far the answer is no. The 1,000 tons per day which I measured was the highest value so far. But I had a few values before, 2 values, one at 800 and one at 900. So it seems to be going back to a set position and then falling away back to a set position, like a very controlled, systematic.
The modal cluster, to the extent you can observe a modal cluster. The modal cluster is around how many tons per day?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we don't have enough data to look at the mode. I think you need
Okay.
quite a bit more data than
Okay.
about.
All right.
I think we've got about 10 data points.
Okay.
So I can give you an idea of what the mean is, and the mean would probably be around 400 tons per day. That's the
Okay.
mean, which probably doesn't give you.
Could you for the non-statistician, you can explain the difference between the mean and the mode? I didn't say the mode. I just said a modal cluster, but
Well, yeah. So the mode is basically what you get when you look at this bell-shaped curve type distribution for your data. So basically, as I said, you need quite a lot of data, and if you plot that data, what you would get is like sort of a bell-shaped distribution where you've got your outliers at the edge, and your data goes up, peaks, and goes down.
yes,
And the peak, that mode, is more or less where your most likely value is, because it's the most common
yes,
value of the lot, or where the most common values tends to lie. Whereas
yes,
is the mean is what most people know as the average, which is
yes,
basically the midpoint between the lower and the upper rounds of the data set.
and the oscillation is so wide between the low point and the high point that the mean doesn't really help us.
Yeah, it's not the best one to be looking at.
Yeah.
The mode is definitely more useful.
The
I
modal
agree
cluster
with
would be
that.
better. Yeah, okay.
But as I said, we need to get more data points before the mode becomes an option that's viable. But the mode would definitely be more useful than the mean to characterize what the volcano is doing.
For the students of statistics at the community college and beyond, they would see the value of the concepts of mean and mode applied to practical day-to-day life.
Yes. There are times when one is more useful than the other.
Yes.
It depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. So you need to choose the correct one.
Yeah.
To suit your needs.
Yes. All right. The Brother Harry, you did statistics.
No, I didn't, Prime Minister.
But it's not so difficult to grasp, is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't.
No.
Well, while I have you, Prime Minister, and TC, there's a question coming in from Professor Robertson. Just got it by WhatsApp. It's pretty long, but I think I should share it at this point in time. It says, to what extent is the government thinking proactively and planning for the reoccupation of the red zone? By this I mean thinking holistically about land use in the areas, given that the eruption has provided an opportunity to possibly reshape the landscape such that the future impacts of volcanic hazard can now be catered for. Example, ensuring that people do not rebuild in the valleys, considering how house roofs can constructed, etc. Has the government given any consideration to establishing a broad-based committee to consider all of these matters? That's from Professor Robertson.
Well, we are in the early days of this. This is what, we are in the early days of the organizational dimensions. What Richie has raised, but that is definitely the area in which we are moving. That is where our policy is. I don't want anybody to say that Ralph is saying that you're not going to occupy the red zone, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm just making the point that Richie makes, that we have to be very vigilant, and we have to strengthen the planning laws, or at least apply the existing planning laws more rigorously in the light of what has happened. And that would call, among other things, for some houses which are already built and which may not have been even severely damaged or destroyed, but which should be pulled down and rebuilt elsewhere. But that has to be done on a case-by-case basis. Clearly, you have the general policy, but we are now going into that for the reconstruction phase, because we have monies in the existing budget, and for housing. And we have added another $12.5 million in these estimates, Richie. Well, $12.5 million, you're just beginning to scratch the surface. But this is for the early part of some rehabilitation, not the full recovery period, where that analysis is yet to be done as to the numbers required. But what you ask about the policy direction, definitely that's where we want to go. Plus, the way you do the roofs too, because the evidence is there before us. If you look at the Anglican Church in Georgetown, and Richie could probably join the conversation, you will see that there was hardly any ash on the Anglican Church roof in Georgetown because of the angle of that roof. That, looking at it without measuring it, it looked to me in excess of 60 degrees. What we have been advised through UNEP, that it should be a degree angle be around 40 to 45 degrees. But when you build like that, it's more expensive. It's more expensive, much more expensive. So we have to come to that realization, and I suspect that the banks and credit unions which are going to give mortgages would also look at that, because they will have an interest as to what would be the value of the security they're holding. They will have to assess the risk value of the security they're holding. I don't know, Richie, if you can indicate whether I answer you appropriately from your own scientific knowledge in terms of the policy guidance, but definitely what you're suggesting, that's where we are going. We have set up a housing subcommittee, an interministerial subcommittee of cabinet, and it has the Minister of Housing as chair, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Works, and the Minister of Urban Development, and their respective technical people from those ministries. So that what Richie is talking about, that is where we are going. The Ministry of Works has in it the Ministry of Physical Planning, so they will be involved in that. And the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning will have economic planning people involved in that too.
All right, to just receive a response, he says that your answer covered the bases, so
okay.
He's quite pleased with your response.
Okay then, fine. We try to be guided by the science, and this is why this education process is so important. I'm trying day by day to read and keep up, and so that I could ask intelligent questions of the persons who are advising us. I don't know if persons have any other questions which would touch on matters with TC, or if they have any questions which they want to ask me. I don't have much to say today new than what I've said. Well, I spoke last night in Parliament, or a person spoke, but arising from everything which has been said, maybe persons have questions, which I don't know how much time TC has, but I really, so if other persons have other questions they want to raise, they can ask them.
There's a question here for Dr. Christopher. It says, "Good morning, Dr. Christopher. Earlier you alluded that the gas emission is indicative of what is happening down below the volcano. Can you be more specific and taking into account the 1902 events, is there the possibility that the activity taking place below is a sign of that there may be a repeat of 1902?
Yeah, this in terms of a repeat of 1902, I don't think that's definitely something you can say. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened in 1902, and if they're referring to the scale of the activity, to be fair, in terms of the volume of this eruption, it would have surpassed 79 so far. It's not quite gotten to the volume that 1902 produced. And I'm not sure how much more it would have needed to get to that stage. What the gas does tell us basically is that you've still got magma down there, the gas in, and that the volcano is still in a position to generate a problem if possible. What it does not tell us is if that volcano has enough energy to push the magma to the surface. So, I mean, let's be clear. There is always magma at depth in volcanic systems. The question is how deep and how much energy it has. I mean, does it have enough energy to come to the surface and create a problem? So the fact that there's magma degassing tells me that you've got magma shallow enough to lose its gas, because if it's too deep, it wouldn't lose the gas. That's the whole thing. If the pressure is too high, all of the gas stays in actual solution. It has to be shallow enough to start losing gas. And as I mentioned, when it comes probably just below or just shallower than 20 kilometers, then is when you start seeing your water and your carbon dioxide coming off. It's not until it gets to around like 8 kilometers where you start seeing sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide coming off. So the fact that we're seeing carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide tells me that you've probably got degassing along your entire system. The question is, does this magma have enough energy to make its way to the surface and generate a problem? And I mean, that is an answer that we don't have, but based on the fact that it's seismically quiet, the deformation is more or less not doing much. You know, it would be, I guess, a bit ambitious for me to sit here and tell you that we definitely think it's going to start back up, because there is no reason for us to think that at the moment. But what we do is react to activity and not so much forecast activity.
All right. I think we have one more question here for you, Dr. Christopher. Is the mountaintop, will the mountaintop be stable enough for people to walk on in the near future? I'm guessing the ridge of the volcano itself, the outer flanks of the volcano, would it be safe to walk there eventually?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. The damage to the edifice of the volcano, to the upper parts of the volcano, is mostly superficial. I mean, the volcanic cone is quite a sturdy thing. So there might be damages to some of the trails, or maybe to some of the valleys where you can see probably new cracks or other things, other features that might be appearing. But in terms of the physical integrity of the actual cone, that cone is still intact. What we'll need reestablishing is the trails to the top of La Soufriere. And I mean, whenever you do get the all clear and it's safe to go up there, what you would see would be a very different type of landscape to what you were used to. It would look like you're probably on the moon when you get up there, because it'll be an area filled with ash. The vegetation would be more or less decimated. There would be a lot of gray. So you would be in awe in terms of what you're seeing up there, or how the landscape looks. But the cone of the volcano would still be strong enough to remain intact and not crumble away, if that's what the person is trying to ask.
All right. I believe that's a final question for you, Dr. Christopher. Prime Minister, any further question?
No, I'm okay with my brother TC, and thanks again for everything, TC.
Thanks, Dr.
Yeah, you're welcome, Prime Minister.
When is your next day off?
I guess it will be tomorrow. I guess you weren't here earlier, but I actually leave on Friday.
Oh, you leave on
So-
Friday?
Yes, sir. So
And you come back when? I mean, I'm really sorry that we haven't had a chance to break bread, and tomorrow is Panel Campbell's funeral and a state funeral, and the country would be absorbed with that. Certainly, well, I see Lion State at the Parliament building, and then later on the funeral. Are you in town tomorrow?
I am currently in the town area, Prime
Oh,
Minister.
you're currently in the town.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm going to try and touch base with you to see if you're in town today.
Yes, sir.
You want to
And
come
probably
by?
tomorrow as well.
You want to? Would you be free around 1 o'clock?
I guess so, sir.
Well,
I
come
should
by
be.
come by the office of the Prime Minister now. Let's break bread. Let's have lunch together.
All right. I'm very honored.
No.
Prime Minister.
I'd love to have you for lunch, man. Around
Wait,
I'll
thank
say
you, sir.
1:45.
Yeah, I'll try and organize it, sir.
All
Thanks a
right.
lot.
The top floor of the financial complex building, the administrative center.
All right. Thank you very much. Prime
I'll have
Minister.
our cabinet colleagues there, so we break bread together, man.
All right. Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher.
We have to give thanks and praises, to God for persons like TC. And I know Richie would be happy for us to say that, because Richie is very magnificent, but he likes to take the spotlight away from himself. I understand that. Any other question for me, or you're going to let me go?
I think there's one more question for
Sure.
you, Prime Minister. I know you have cabinet later on this morning. Given the fact that insurance companies will not insure properties in the red zone anymore, what plans does the government have in place for people trying to get refinancing on mortgages to repair their homes?
I don't know. I don't have the insurance company said that. I don't know that is true.
I'm not sure if that's the case.
No, I don't think that is true. I believe what they will do, they will assess the risks differently. I don't know to what extent that if at all the premiums might be higher, because the truth of the matter is this: I don't know if I don't think the premiums cover volcanic eruptions. I mean, the policy, sorry.
I'm not sure if they do.
Yeah, so all those are the issues which insurances would look at, insurance companies. But remember, in the country as a whole, they'll spread the risks.
Yes.
In fact, not just in the country, but in the region, they would also spread the risks. The same companies particularly those companies which are cross-border now. But I don't know. There's the property insurance which excludes volcanic eruptions.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So I don't think that what is said is true. But I can find that out, and I can provide. I could find it out myself, or get somebody in finance to check it out. Or if one of the mornings we could probably get Joe Sheridan, who was an insurance consultant, to speak to the issue now.
Yes.
Because Joe doesn't represent any particular insurance company, but he advises the clients as to the best type of insurance to get, and so on and so forth. So he's very cognizant of what the insurance companies, what they do. So I wouldn't venture to answer other than what I've said. But I don't believe, I may be wrong, but I don't think that what the question states as a fact is a fact.
All right. That's the final question, Prime Minister.
Thanks, and I want to thank you guys at NBC Radio. You all still do your 24-hour runs?
We ended it on Monday night, sir.
Or you ended it on Monday night?
Yes.
All right. Well, you all have done a remarkable job thus far, and really, I love you all very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it, Prime Minister.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Good. Fine.
You've been listening to I and Soufriere, the morning edition here on NBC. Thanks very much to all those who sent in their questions, their comments. Thanks to Dr. Thomas Christopher for joining in this morning. Prime Minister Dr. The Honorable Ralph Gonsalves joined us by phone. Join us tomorrow morning. Another one for you then. Do stay with us. We're NBC Radio, broadcasting from studios located at Richmond Hill in Kingston for this, the 12th day in the month of